The fact that something has to have a creation just leads to the next question of, well, then who created that entity and who created that entity? And the theological answer is, well, God is that which does not need to be created. Well, why can't the universe be that which does not need to be created?
Okay, let's pause there. Michael, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point, Stephen.
What I would say to that is that
Let's begin.
The theory of evolution is now being challenged by a new theory that says the universe looks designed because it was designed. The concept is called intelligent design because it claims there was an intelligence behind creation. A leading proponent is Dr. Stephen Meyer. He's director of the Center for Science and Culture at Seattle's Discovery Institute and co-author of Darwinism, Design, and Public Education. Disagreeing with him is Dr. Michael Shermer, publisher of Skeptic Magazine and author of The Science of Good and Evil.
They're both like our age at this point.
That's kind of crazy.
That's wild. Maybe a little bit older, but
maybe a little older.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I want to start with you, Dr. Meyer, because you're kind of making the affirmative claim here and say, you know, if you can just avoid the technical jargon as much as you can, give me 3 or 4 reasons why you believe there is an intelligent designer of the universe.
You bet. Maybe I should start from the beginning. Cosmologists and physicists now tell us that the universe began from a finite time ago, from an infinitesimally small spatial volume, effectively a 0 point, in which there was neither matter, nor space, nor time, nor energy. And this points to a cause beyond the universe, for the cause of the universe itself, something that a cause that would transcend matter, space, time, and energy. Secondly, physicists are now talking about the fine-tuning of the universe. They tell us that the initial arrangement of matter, the laws and constants of physics, are all delicately balanced to allow for life to exist. For example, if the force of gravitational attraction were a little bit stronger or weaker, if the rate of the expansion of the universe were a little bigger or smaller, life would be impossible as we know it. One physicist, Sir Fred Hoyle, has said that it looks as if a super intellect has monkeyed with physics and chemistry to make life possible. And thirdly, and I think most importantly, in the realm of biology, people have over the last 50 years discovered an intricate realm of nanotechnology and information processing. There are little miniature circuits inside cells, so-called signal transduction circuits. There are little miniature machines. My colleague Michael Behe at the Discovery Institute has made one of these famous, a little rotary engine inside the cell wall that looks like something, for all the world, like something that Mazda designed. It has O-rings, it has bushings, it has a drive shaft, it has a little propeller that moves this little bacterium through liquid. This is high tech in low life. And I think finally and most importantly is the discovery that at the base of all life depends on information, that it depends on a 4-character digital code that is resident in the DNA molecule. And people who are trying to explain the origin of life through various types of evolutionary theory have been utterly flummoxed by the question of the origin of these genetic assembly instructions.
Michael, you're the editor of Skeptic Magazine.
Let me just jump in there and just say, you know, number one, this is the greatest show of all time. I mean, The Faith Under Fire, Lee Strobel hosting, having interviews with skeptics and experts. I mean, what else could you ask for? Bring back Faith Under Fire. That's all I'm saying.
Please, why don't they do this anymore?
Please.
Nobody talks across the aisle anymore.
Yeah, this is excellent. And then also just to say, you know, this is an older clip, but Stephen Meyer is still extremely active. He was on Joe Rogan recently, and he has this excellent book called The Return of the God Hypothesis that is just fantastic. So if you're interested in even newer versions of some of the arguments that he's giving there, it's worth checking out.
And dare I say that we're actually reading that book starting basically right now in the book club, in the Wisdom Society, and we'll be joined by Dr. Stephen Meyer on October 3rd. If you'd like to join us, click the link in the description.
Incredible.
Yeah,
Incredible.
I'm stoked on that, honestly.
I don't expect you to be anything less than skeptical about that. Well, how do you analyze the evidence as Dr. Meyer presented it?
Well, it's important to note that when we're talking about those kinds of questions, regardless of whether the answers I'm about to give are right or not, and they may change because science is constantly changing, the default answer is not that therefore there must be a designer or a God. A default answer that's perfectly acceptable in science is we don't know. Now, we do know actually quite a bit about the 4 categories that Stephen just discussed. For example, the fact that the universe had an origin and therefore there must have been a creator just begs the question of, well, who created the creator or the intelligent designer? The fact that something has to have a creation just leads to the next question of, well, then who created that entity and who created that entity? And the theological answer is, well, God is that which does not need to be created. Well, why can't the universe be that which does not need to be created?
Okay, let's pause there. I know that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point, Stephen.
What I would say to that is that philosophically, something has to be the thing from which everything else comes. Something has to be what philosophers call the prime reality. And
why does it have to be God? Maybe who created God? That's what I want to know.
The Big Bang Theory and general relativity suggest that matter is a crummy candidate to be the thing from which everything else comes, because if you go back far enough, you end up with a place in which you have no matter, no space, no time, no energy.
It may just be pure energy. It could be quantum foam fluctuation. It could be a black hole in another universe. It could be a number of things. We're not sure yet.
What physicists are saying now is that the primary thing at the very beginning is actually an information wave. And again, we're back to the same argument I was making in biology, that information in our experience comes from mind. And so from what we know about the causes of the origin of information, we're looking at evidence of design not only in life, but right back to the beginning of the universe.
Okay, but where did the information come from, in your opinion, in the first place?
I think it came from an intelligent creator that transcends matter, space, time, and energy.
And who created that intelligent creator?
I think that is the prime reality.
Okay, Mike.
Okay, we got to pause here because there was so much that was just unloaded. I'll let you kind of go first here, and then we can kind of start to chop it up. And there is more in this clip. This is just like one, like I'm saying, this clip is crazy because they like tip over every sacred cow back to back to back. And one of my reactions to this is like, this conversation really hasn't changed in the last 15 years. The same pattern of thought continues again and again and again. So let's see if we can clear it up once and for all here.
So the idea, he says, the default is that we just say we don't know. And that's sort of like this neutral position that is supposedly unbiased that, atheists have. But that's not true, because most societies throughout human history have been religious. I mean, the vast majority of people who have ever lived have looked at reality and said, I didn't make this. I didn't come up with this. And look at the order and the majesty and the beauty of creation. There must be a God. So it seems like that's almost the default position. And then on top of that, we all have to decide what we're going to do with the information out there. And if you decide, no, everything just sort of happened accidentally, or it all happened randomly by chance, and there's no higher order, that's a commitment. That's a worldview commitment that has consequences. If there isn't a God, then the consequences are you were predetermined to do it by your biology anyway. But if there is a God, and this is kind of Pascal's wager, there's infinite consequences for that. There's infinite judgment that's going to result from that. So just this idea that it's all default atheism is just silly in my opinion.
To use a really basic analogy that I heard someone give one time, if you were to come home and on the countertop with the, alphabet cereal or whatever, it was spelled out articulately, welcome home from school, this is your mom, I love you. It, in a sense, would be a mom of the gaps argument to infer that there was intelligence behind the formation of those letters. In a sense, it would be a mom of the gaps argument. But in another sense, you realize the absurdity of stuffing God of the gaps into the gaps. And that's sort of what I see Shermer doing here, is just to say anything that points to intelligence is not allowed.
Yeah.
To suggest that information points to intelligence, even like to go back to the kitchen analogy here, to say that that's not allowed, I think is philosophically hugely problematic because it predetermines that we omit one plausible conclusion.
Yeah. And the most obvious plausible conclusion is that it's your mom. She wrote that note to you,
Yes.
And in the same way, I think the most plausible conclusion is there's this language in our DNA, there's this fine-tuning in this universe, and it seems very plausible that those sorts of things are created by a mind that transcends our created order. So, and the idea of, well, who created the creator, that's just a playground argument. I mean, that's just not even, that's a misunderstanding, a fundamental misunderstanding of the Kalam argument, which is whatever begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. Well, God doesn't begin to exist. That's what God is. He's the fundamental foundation of all reality.
And in case someone says, well, that's special pleading, you're saying, hey, our God gets to not begin to exist. The point, in case anyone missed it, that Dr. Meyer is making here is that, as far as I understand it, basically, given that there is existence itself, given that there is anything, something must be eternal.
Yeah.
Or else you're faced with an infinite regression problem. Well, what caused that? What caused that? What caused that?
Buck's got to stop somewhere.
There has to be an unmoved mover of all the other train cars. How are the train cars moving? Let's go to the next train car. Let's go to the next train car. At some point, there has to be one unmoved mover that's not getting pushed by anything else, that's pushing everything else. One uncaused first cause. There must be some primary thing, given that anything at all exists. So then the question becomes, is it the creation or the creator, to stuff in a little bit of my bias, but is it God, or is it these, energy, raw energy, quantum fluctuations, math? Am I the only one that just feels like each of those things is inherently derivative? They don't provide an explanation. Saying language is primary is not logical. Yeah. Saying math is primary is not logical. Yeah. Saying energy is primary is not logical. Just positing that some material thing is primary, just, I don't know if I'm the only one, but it just does not compute.
Yeah. Like John Lennox said, the laws of mathematics never put any money in my pocket. You've got to actually go out there and do stuff. You've got to have agents that create and take actions. So the laws of nature are just descriptions of the ways that things usually operate.
But wait, there's more, folks.
Michael, beyond this issue of the beginning of the universe,
yeah, okay.
and it seems to me he's saying whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe, virtually every scientist admits, began to exist, therefore must have a cause.
Yeah, but you're just talking about ultimate causes.
I understand that, but the question then becomes,
Yeah, let's talk about design and biology.
All right, okay, let's move on. So let's go to the next point. It looks designed. It is designed. That's why it looks designed. It is designed. We're not debating whether it's design or not. There is design. You'd have to be barking mad to not think that the life is not designed. It is designed, but it's designed from the bottom up by a natural process of evolution. And that's why it looks tinkered and not very well designed and sort of patchworked and put together from previous organisms and structures and functions and so on. It doesn't look to me very well intelligent design.
Good point. Stephen, how do you respond to those?
Well, I think it's exquisitely designed, especially when you look at what's going on at the molecular level and the information processing system that is the basis of all living systems. He's made the argument, for example, that the eye is not well designed because the wiring appears inverted to some physiologists, but others dispute that and say that the vertebrate eye is an exquisitely designed system that represents what engineers call constrained optimization, where many factors have been optimized to achieve the best overall functionality. So this vertebrate eye that evolutionists say is not well designed, that looks tinkered with, is actually the same eye that eagles use to achieve this incredible visual acuity that they have.
The intelligent design movement has been criticized by some by saying, hey, it's just a bunch of Christians trying to get their theological viewpoint propagated. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, it would be fair if it were also fair to say that Darwinism has been undermined in its credibility by the fact that many or most Darwinists are agnostics or atheists. I mean, Michael Shermer and Eugenie Scott and Richard Dawkins have all signed the Third Humanist Manifesto, which is a call for an aggressive atheistic world order. And two can play that motive-mongering game, but the problem with it is that it doesn't settle anything. You have to evaluate arguments by the quality of the evidence and the reasoning that are used to support them.
And there has been
Michael Shermer wants to say that belief in intelligent design is a weird belief that's used to justify a prior religious commitment. We think it's a perfectly sensible belief, whatever your religious commitment. If you see evidence of software or something that functions like software, it's perfectly reasonable to infer that there was a programmer.
Of course, but when almost every single member I know of your movement is an evangelical Christian, you hardly have any Jews or Baptists or Buddhists or anything like that. That makes me suspect. That just makes me suspect of something. It would be like if every single member of a group were Democrat or Republican, and I would think, okay, maybe they're right, but that makes me skeptical of something else going on here.
Stephen, I want to ask you, is it possible to believe...
He sort of was not able to get his point out there, so I want to just state it clearly. That is false. The Discovery Institute that Stephen Meyer, I think, is the president of or leading director of or something like that.
Yeah.
He, I was actually talking to him last year, and he was telling me about how they have a ton of different types of people who are interested in intelligent design, from Buddhist to Hindu, global academics, and a lot of different fields that are interested in this as a theory. And in fact, the proponents of intelligent design, there's actually a few examples now where they've actually been able to find a new discovery based on this thesis, and that's, let's plug this idea in and see where it takes us, and it's actually led to a few breakthroughs, which is very cool.
Well, it also strikes me as similar to the argument of like, well, you can't trust that the disciples believed that Jesus rose from the dead because they were believers. It's like, well, yeah, so would you be if you saw that Jesus rose from the dead. Like, if you're convinced that the universe has been designed, well, then you're going to have to ask the question, who is this designer and what is he like? And there's really only a couple potential options for you out there. I mean, yes, there are a huge number of religions in the world, but most of them are, tiny or not very well evidenced, and you kind of need to narrow it down. And, I wouldn't be even bothered by the fact that a lot of the intelligent design proponents were Christians, because I think that's where the evidence points. Why are you lambasting them for believing where the evidence clearly points?
It's also interesting. This could be a whole other video, and maybe we should do this at some point, but the amount of people that are totally open to simulation theory or to the idea that we were seeded here by a higher life form, aliens from another planet seeded us here, those ideas are totally cool.
Yeah,
no problem whatsoever, very rational, so long as that higher intelligence that the DNA does seem to be pointing to is not one that is a arbiter of how one lives their life, etc., which is really actually a shame, because... And that's one of, honestly, my missions with doing this entire thing on YouTube is basically how do I put this? How much do you have to despise who you think the God of the Bible is in order to reject him basically at all cost? Yeah. And so I do feel like a huge part of at least my mission, because I've been there, is to say there's maybe a straw man or a caricature or even a bad person in church who has poorly represented the God of the universe. And so if you have that view that God is a moral monster, that God is an evil arbiter of law, then I totally get it why you would want to basically reject that premise at all costs. Unfortunately, I do think that is the case for a lot of people. I wrestled through that thing myself, where it's like, I got to figure out how to make this not true because I don't like the implications of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You should want Christianity to be true. Like, when you genuinely understand who Jesus is and what he's like and how good he is and how much he loves you, how much he desires to save you, like, I have a video on my channel about this, that you should actually want Christianity to be true, but a lot of people don't, because they've seen misrepresented, they've had hypocritical Christians in their lives, they've misunderstood key elements of Christianity, and so they think that God is just this angry, horrible being that they would do anything to make him not exist. So I think you're right on with that.
I might even go as far as to say that if you have a right understanding of who God is, and if you have a right understanding of who you are, then you will want Christianity to be true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we should keep going here. I don't know how much is left, but this is good.
Good.
Believe in Darwinian evolution and be a Christian.
It's certainly possible as a personal matter, but I think it's logically contradictory. The problem is, it really depends on what you mean by evolution. If by evolution you mean simply that things change, yeah, things change, and you can believe that and be a Christian, a theist, a Jew, anything you like, and be logically consistent. What Darwinism says, though, is things change as a result of a purely undirected natural process.
I don't see why it couldn't be perfectly reasonable for a believer to think that it or God or whoever used the natural forces to create life as it is. That's how God works. What's wrong with that?
Well, that's right. If he uses natural forces, directs them in some way, that's a form of design. That's not what Darwinism says. Darwinism says things look designed, but they're not really, because an undirected directed process produced the appearance of design.
But I mean the actual...
A designer can't direct an undirected process.
Well, a designer could use natural selection. A designer could do anything he wants, particularly
it's directed process, isn't it? It's a directed process.
Well, I mean, first of all, then why are you an atheist, Michael? And secondly, or an agnostic, or whatever you are. And secondly, Darwin explicitly rejected that interpretation of natural selection.
Okay.
The whole point of it is that it's natural selection, he said, acting on random variation. If you want to make it, if you want God directing it, it defeats the purpose of my theory, he said.
Okay, two answers. One, I don't believe in God because I don't think the evidence is strong enough to make that commitment, which is not a small commitment to make. It's an important, serious one. I was once a born-again Christian. I did that. It was serious. I don't think it's something you take lightly, and my evaluation of the evidence now is it's not enough. So, and two, I have a commitment to science, and the scientific method requires that we look for natural explanations for natural phenomena. There is no such thing as the supernatural or the paranormal. There's just the natural, the normal, and all the stuff we can't explain yet. And it's okay in science to just say, I don't know. We don't have answers to all these things.
Well, we agree with that too. I mean, there's an awful lot of dogmatic Darwinism that would be much better served by exactly the attitude that you suggest. That, you know,
okay,
rather than saying we understand something we don't, it's good to say we don't know.
Yeah.
But our argument is based on what we know and on the kind of logical apparatus that's used routinely in science, which is to say, given the evidence, what's the best explanation given everything we know so far? And that's the grounds by which we infer design.
So you're kind of marrying scientific naturalism and scientism together and essentially saying, you know, this is the only way that I can explain the world and this explains everything. And you're missing all of this, which, by the way, the foundations of science can't be explained naturalistically. You need to understand Albert Einstein said one of the most incomprehensible things about the universe is that it is comprehensible. Why can we understand? Why can our minds come to conclusions about rational thoughts, about propositions that fit and match reality, and we can rationally come to these conclusions? Well, only if we have these kind of truth-seeking minds that are able to make these conclusions. And you can't prove that naturalistically.
So in other words, the idea that truth can only be arrived at using science is not arrived at using science. It's arrived at using reason.
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
That's super interesting. I also love that final point that he makes there, that it's basically a refutation of the accusation that intelligent design is nothing but God of the gaps, because he kind of highlights and I think ends strongly there by just saying it's not that we're saying we don't know, therefore God. We're saying we do know in every other instance that we have to look at, that when you're faced with this type of information, it points to intelligence. Yeah. That's what we do know.
Yeah, specified information comes from minds. And information that serves a specific purpose. We create that's exactly what we're doing right now. I'm creating words with my mouth that convey ideas, and it's coming from my mind. And so we're arguing from something that we do know. So I think you're exactly right.
Anything else on this one?
That's it.
All right.